Guest at the table. I woke up to the sound of voices. Faint, murmuring, like someone was speaking in hushed tones just a room away. My mind was sluggish, stuck somewhere between sleep and waking, and for a moment, I thought maybe the TV was on. But I don't have a TV in the kitchen. The glow of the alarm clock burned red, 2:15 in the morning. Too late for anyone to be here. Too late for me to be imagining things. My apartment was small, just a one-bedroom, and I lived alone. I had locked the door before bed. I was sure of it. I sat up, straining to hear, but the voices had gone quiet. Just the hum of the refrigerator, the distant sound of a car passing outside. My mouth was dry, and a deep, unsettling tightness settled in my gut. I told myself it was nothing, just the remnants of a dream clinging to me. But something about the silence felt wrong. It wasn't just quiet. It was expectant. I swung my legs off the bed and stood. The air was cool against my skin, and the wooden floor creaked beneath my weight. Step by step, I made my way to the door, pressing my ear against it. Nothing. The tension in my chest eased slightly, but I wasn't ready to let it go. The hallway was dark, save for the weak sliver of light spilling in from the kitchen. I could see the edge of the counter, the chair tucked beneath the small dining table where I had left my half-eaten dinner. I took a slow step forward. Then another. The kitchen came into full view. Everything was exactly as I had left it. Almost. The plate was still there, the remains of my spaghetti congealing in a mess of sauce and noodles. My fork, the same one I had dropped onto the plate hours ago, was no longer resting on the edge. It was standing upright, halfway to someone's mouth, except there was no one there. I felt my stomach drop, a cold sweat breaking out along my spine. The fork hovered in midair, trembling slightly, then moved, slowly, deliberately, descending toward the plate. It speared a chunk of pasta, twisted lazily, and lifted again, pausing as if waiting for invisible lips to part and accept the bite. I couldn't move. My brain refused to process what I was seeing. The only sound in the room was my own heartbeat pounding in my ears, deafening in its rhythm. Then, just as my body caught up with my brain and I stepped backward, the chair across from mine scraped against the floor. It moved, shifting slightly, like someone was adjusting their seat. My breath caught in my throat. The fork hovered once more before lowering again. Twisting. Lifting. Eating. Something was sitting at my table. Something I couldn't see. And it was eating my food. The air in the room felt thick, suffocating. I couldn't tell if it was the fear choking me or something else, something unseen pressing against my skin, watching me watch it. I wanted to run, to flee back to my room and slam the door, but my body was frozen. And then, for the first time, I heard it. A low, wet sound. A sound that made my stomach twist with revulsion. Chewing. The invisible guest was enjoying its meal. I wanted to scream, but my throat was locked tight. My feet felt glued to the floor, my pulse hammering in my ears. The fork dipped into my food again, twirling noodles, the unseen diner taking another slow bite. The wet, deliberate chewing sound filled the room, impossibly loud in the silence. I forced myself to move. One slow step backward, then another. The chair creaked again, a small shift like whoever, or whatever, it was had just noticed me standing there. The fork hesitated midair. The chewing stopped. A long, breathy exhale filled the room, a sound that wasn't mine. I ran. Barefoot, heart in my throat, I turned on my heel and bolted down the hallway, slamming into my bedroom doorframe. I fumbled for the light switch, but my fingers were clumsy, slipping over the plastic. The bulb flickered to life, casting a dull yellow glow over the room. I grabbed my phone off the nightstand, hands shaking as I tried to unlock it. My fingers were slick with sweat. I needed to call someone, anyone. The police? A friend? What the hell was I even supposed to say? Help, there's something invisible eating my dinner? The silence from the kitchen stretched. No more scraping, no more chewing. Then, footsteps. Soft. Measured. Coming toward me. I gripped my phone tighter, staring at the open bedroom door. The hallway was dark, a yawning void leading back to whatever I had just left behind. My breath came fast and shallow. I could hear it now, the slow shift of weight on the floorboards. A pause. Another step. It was coming. I lunged forward and slammed the door shut, locking it in one frantic motion. My back pressed against the wood, my breath ragged. I strained to listen. Silence. A minute passed. Then another. I wanted to believe it was over. That I had imagined it. That my exhaustion had twisted some half-forgotten dream into waking horror. But the moment that thought crossed my mind, something knocked. Once. Twice. 3 slow, deliberate taps against the door. And then. A whisper. Not words. Not anything I could understand. Just the sound of something breathing against the wood, waiting. I sat on the floor, my back pressed against the door, trying to convince myself that this wasn't happening. Cold sweat trickled down my spine, my shirt clinging to my damp skin, and my breathing sounded far too loud in the suffocating silence. I listened intently, unable to stop myself from counting the seconds between those dreadful sounds. The first pause. The second. And then, 3 slow knocks again. Light, almost playful, as if someone wasn't knocking but merely testing the texture of the door, feeling how it responded to touch. A flood of thoughts raced through my mind, everything I knew about home invasions. If it was a burglar, why hadn't they just broken in? Why weren't they trying to force the door or climb through a window? Why were they just sitting there in the dark, eating my dinner, acting as if I were the unwanted guest in my own home? But the worst part was that, from the very beginning, it hadn't felt human. I held my breath, pressing myself harder against the wood, waiting. Nothing. No movement, no knocking, no breathing. But just when I almost convinced myself that I had imagined it, a sound came again. Not a knock. Not words. But a muffled, creaking breath, as if cracked lips were moving right by the door's edge, whispering something I couldn't make out. And then, suddenly, something heavy pressed against the door. I heard the material strain, the wood slightly creak, as if a whole weight had just leaned against it from the other side. My heart stopped. I could almost picture it, a palm resting there, unseen, formless, yet real enough to exert pressure. The phone in my hand vibrated, and I nearly screamed before realizing it was just a call. The screen lit up with a name, Jake. I tapped the screen as if it could save me and brought the phone to my ear. Hello? My voice came out hoarse, like I hadn't spoken in ages. Dude, did you fall asleep at your desk again? Jake chuckled, and I could almost see his relaxed grin. I called earlier, you didn't pick up. Hey, you good? I opened my mouth to answer, but a new sound stopped me. A faint, deliberate creak. The door handle had begun to turn. I gripped the phone so tightly my fingers went numb, trying not to make a sound. But couldn't he hear it? Couldn't he hear what was happening? Hello? Dude? You there? Jake's voice sounded distant, as if he were speaking through water. The handle turned all the way. I didn't breathe. And then, it let go. Silence. But the feeling that something was still standing there never left. I knew this wasn't over. A cold realization settled in my chest like a block of ice. Whatever was on the other side of the door wasn't trying to break in. It wasn't trying to leave either. It was just waiting. Watching. Testing me. Dude, what the hell? Say something. Jake's voice buzzed in my ear, grounding me for a split second, but I couldn't force a single word out. Instead, I slowly shifted my position, moving away from the door as quietly as possible. My knees felt weak, my muscles stiff from the unnatural stillness, but I didn't dare rush. I had to think. I had to do something other than sit here and let the fear crawl up my throat like a disease. The kitchen. I needed to see it again. I swallowed hard and forced my legs to move, creeping toward the hallway. My socks slid silently across the floor, and I kept my breathing shallow, listening for anything, any change in the air, any shift in the weight pressing against that cursed door. But there was nothing. As I neared the kitchen entrance, my stomach clenched. The light was still on. The dinner plate still sat on the table, slightly pushed aside, my half-eaten meal left exactly as I had seen it before. The fork, it was gone. I scanned the room, pulse hammering against my ribs. No footprints, no signs of movement, except for the chair. The chair that had been neatly tucked under the table before was now slightly pulled back, as if someone had just stood up. Jake was still talking in my ear, but his voice had become distant noise, something unreal, disconnected from this moment. I stepped forward cautiously, feeling like I was intruding in my own home, like I had walked in on something I wasn't supposed to see. And then, my eyes landed on it. The fork. It lay on the floor, right beside the chair. But not as if someone had dropped it. No. The way it rested, positioned so neatly, perfectly straight, was deliberate. A message. I exhaled sharply, my mouth suddenly dry, my fingers tingling. The whole room felt heavier, the air thick with something I couldn't name. I bent down slowly, reaching for the fork, afraid to touch it yet more afraid to leave it there. My fingers hovered just above the cold metal when a whisper. Right next to my ear. So close I could feel the breath of it. Not yours. I recoiled, heart slamming against my ribs, my head whipping around to face the empty space beside me. Nothing. No one. But I knew, something had been there. The whisper had weight. It had shape. It had presence. I stumbled backward, knocking against the table, and in that moment, the overhead light flickered. Once. Twice. And then, in a violent burst, it went out completely, plunging the kitchen into darkness. And in the silence that followed, I heard it. The unmistakable sound of the chair being pulled back again. Slowly. Deliberately. As if something, or someone, was sitting back down at the table. I froze. My breath caught in my throat as the scraping of wood against the floor echoed through the pitch-black kitchen. The chair had moved. Again. Something was sitting down. The air had weight now, thick and suffocating, pressing against my skin like damp fabric. My instinct screamed at me to run, but my legs remained locked in place, as if something unseen had wound invisible chains around my ankles. Jake's voice buzzed in my ear, distorted, distant. "Dude, are you even listening? What's going on over there?" I tried to speak, tried to form words, but my throat had closed up. My fingers tightened around the fork, the same fork that had just been used by something, and the metal felt ice cold, almost burning against my skin. And then, movement. A faint creak. Not from the chair this time. No, this sound came from the table. A slight shift. A presence leaning forward. I couldn't see it. But I felt it. Something was sitting across from me. And it was waiting. A slow, deliberate tap against the wooden surface broke the silence, once, twice, 3 times. Knuckles against the table. As if to get my attention. As if to say, "I know you're here. I see you." My stomach twisted into a knot so tight I thought I might collapse. Then, something new. The sound of chewing. Soft, wet, methodical. Something was eating. My dinner. A sharp pang of nausea hit me as my mind painted the image my eyes refused to see. The fork rising. Food vanishing into an unseen mouth. Teeth grinding, tongue smacking. I had to move. I had to. The floor groaned beneath my weight as I took an involuntary step back. Silence. The chewing stopped. The entire room listened. And then, the chair scraped back violently. Something was standing up. And it was coming for me. The air in the room shifted, as if something massive had just stood up, disturbing the stillness. I couldn't see it, but I felt it. That overwhelming sensation of being watched, of something vast and unseen looming over me, its presence pressing against my skin like static before a storm. My fingers were numb around the fork. My heart slammed against my ribs, each beat a deafening drum in the suffocating silence. Then, a step. A soft, deliberate thud against the wooden floor. Then another. Something was walking toward me. I stumbled back, my foot catching on the edge of the rug. The phone in my hand slipped, tumbling onto the floor with a dull clunk. "Hello?" Jake's voice crackled from the speaker. "What was that? What the hell is going on?" I barely heard him. My entire body was locked in place, my senses stretching outward, desperately trying to see what my eyes refused to register. My gaze darted to the empty space in front of me, the place where a presence now loomed, invisible yet impossibly real. A breath. Not mine. Close. Right in front of me. The kind of breath you feel more than here, warm and shallow, stirring the fine hairs on your skin. A scent followed. Rotten. Damp. Like meat left out too long. The unseen thing took another step. Closer. My body finally reacted. I lurched backward, my shoulder slamming into the doorframe. Pain shot up my arm, but I barely registered it. My only thought was distance. I needed space between me and whatever the hell was standing there. And then, the fork slipped from my hand. The soft metallic clang as it hit the floor was deafening. It was the only sound in the entire room. Everything stopped. Then, movement. Fast. Sudden. Coming straight at me. I did the only thing I could. I ran.